rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your venerable and always here, well, maybe not always, but most of the time here, host Rick. Yes, I do crack myself up sometimes because, let's face it, you got to make your own entertainment for the fun of it. Anyway, hello and welcome everyone from shore to shore and all the way across this wonderful country, this wonderful place that we call home. Welcome to all my Whiskey Warriors and my Whiskey Warrior P1s that are out there. And of course, any guests, new folks, anyone who is here for the first time, welcome. Oh, looks like a couple of my folks over on Rumble, my P1 listeners over on Rumble, one of them is having some problems with his keyboard. Oh, yes. Thank you, Tommy, for the reminder, because, obviously, Becky popped in toward the end, but yeah, I do have to definitely mention the Australian contingent down there in the Dan Under, the Dan Under. With anyway, I won't insult Becky with my Australian accent. The prawns. Anyway, oh gosh, sometimes I have fun on this show. Anyway, welcome to all. Last night the wonderful X Spaces had a bit of a problem in the beginning, and the reason being, of course, at least we're being initially told, was that X experienced a distributed denial of service attack. And once they got that cleared up, though, man, everything cleared up just nice and clean. In fact, you can go and listen to the recording over on Trump's @RealDonaldTrump X account. I listened to it, some of it today. I recorded all of it, but obviously I couldn't listen to everything. But anyway, so yeah, I did all kinds of stuff for that, and there it was. So unlike what a lot of the leftist mainstream media is trying to tell you, Trump did not slur his words. In fact, if you listen to it, there are some S's in there, and both Elon and Trump had some very pronounced S's, just like I do here. I have pronounced S's at times, and it's just because of the way that I state things and say things with all of this. So anyway, the whole point of it obviously was to get Trump into a relaxed atmosphere and to be able to discuss any and all topics. Now, they didn't get really too far, outside of what Trump normally would discuss, but there were a couple of tidbits, a couple of things in there that I found sort of fascinating that I want to bring up to you tonight. But first, before I get into the program, let's go ahead and do the most important thing. Let's stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are of mind, please stand, remove your hats, put your hand over your heart, and let's follow along with 3 Chevy over on Rumble Land in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And of course, thank you for that 3 Chevy. Also, too, if you would like to get your Pledge of Allegiance, your version of the Pledge of Allegiance, put here on the program, please record yourself doing it and then send me that audio file. You can send that audio file, email it to me at fans, F-A-N-S, at americanperspective.online. That's fans, F-A-N-S, at americanperspective.online. And tonight's sponsor is one of the fabulous things that, that's interesting. One of the fabulous things that I wear at almost every single program, which is the flag shirt. This I'm wearing right now is the Declaration of Independence flag shirt. And I got it from theflagshirt.com. They have some fantastic patriotic apparel for men, women, kids. They also have a bunch of accessories like sunglasses and hats and socks and ties and things like that. You can go and check out all of those deals. And right now they've got, as you can see on the screen, they've got August deals right now where there are some select styles that are up to 50% off. And you can go and check all of that out at theflagshirt.com, theflagshirt.com. And hey, I'm going to throw in a little extra incentive for you. If you go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online, once again, that's flagshirt.americanperspective.online, you can get yourself a coupon code for $5 off your order at theflagshirt.com. So you go to flagshirt.americanperspective.online, grab that code and put it into the promo code box at checkout when you are ordering from theflagshirt.com. Go to theflagshirt.com and get yourself patriotized. All right, folks. So first things first, of course, we had, and I attempted to get in. It turns out that the problems or the issues that they were having took roughly 40 minutes to finally get everything all kind of worked out. And so, it started late. And I'll admit, after I ended the program, I tried to get back into the spaces. I got back into the spaces. I considered setting a stream back up, but I also realized that a lot of people had probably left, and so it really wouldn't have made that much of a difference anyway. Like I said, you can go and listen to the recording. I did, if you want, or if you can. To go to X and listen to the recording. If not, there's plenty of clips, and most of the clips are honestly really more along the lines of what you really want to listen to. There was a lot of, and the left is right about this. The two of them kind of got together and, they spent a little bit of time over the course of the thing complimenting each other and that kind of stuff, which is typically like what you do. But, in those kinds of settings, for sure. I mean, whenever I have a guest, of course, I am complimentary to my guest, and they generally will respond the same way. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that happened. Adversarial interviews can sometimes happen, but the key here was that it wasn't your standard adversarial interview here. What Elon was attempting to set up was more of a personable, conversationalist kind of scenario. And so what ended up happening for the most part was that's pretty much what it was, is it was kind of a back and forth. It wasn't an adversarial interview like what you normally would see Trump at. And so you kind of got a better feel for what and who, if you didn't have it already, but what and who Trump actually is. Now, the conversation varied, topics varied. There was some, shifts and gentle pushes from Elon and a little bit of pushback from Trump. They didn't necessarily agree on everything, which is pretty cool. Whenever you have any kind of an interview, it kind of sucks when the interviewer sits there and just agrees and nods their head, like mainstream media will most likely do when Kamala finally sits down for her interview. I mean, that's what they are, is they're sycophantic leftist bobbleheads. But beyond that, we had them discuss a few key things. And the first thing, of course, is Elon kind of talked to Trump a little bit about the assassination attempt. Now, the reason why this is important is not so much the fact that it occurred, and not so much that he himself, what he went through, like he hasn't talked about it already. But it was more of, I think, a strategic move, because the mainstream media has been trying to memory hole and black hole the whole idea of Trump having an attempted assassination try, and the thoughts that, again, in an attempt to kind of humanize Trump, to have him discuss what his mindset was, what he thought when the actions were happening, so on and so forth, was just, I think it was important to do. And so they opened up with that. And Trump talked about it, but he also made a mention, and I think this is really key and important, is that made a mention that he actually believes, in his mindset anyway, that he actually believes that God intervened because of the way that things were happening and the way that things went on, that he believed that God intervened in the possibility of him getting killed. And I think that's important, because a lot of people look at Trump and they look at some of the things that he's done, such as, his infidelity and those kinds of things. And they tend to be critical of especially Christians who are backing Trump and, trying to demonstrate that he's a man. Men fail. None of us are perfect. And to have an experience like that, where that if things did not fall out specifically and exactly the way that they did, that you potentially could no longer be on this earth, it tends to change you. It tends to change your outlook. It tends to change how you feel about things in this world. And for him to sit there and to basically say that, God laid his hand on me, it makes him human. It makes him a humanistic. It doesn't make him the devil or the creature that the left tries to portray upon him. And honestly, I mean, if you get the opportunity, please go ahead and listen to it, because it's better to get it directly from the man than to sit here and try and discuss a little bit about it from a third party or from an outsider's point of view at all. But I would try that. That's like the very first thing that they talk about. And so it's really not that difficult to necessarily, have to try and like skim through stuff to get to that very important point and discussion. Well, then they moved on from that. And when they moved on to it, they went to the important things that I think realistically are going to line up and define this election. They talked about inflation. They talked about spending. They talked about the border. They talked about efficiency in government, which I think is really key, because all of that is tied to spending and inflation. And so there also were a couple of things too that there were a couple things too that I thought were sort of surprising. And they give an indication as to where Trump might be thinking in terms of what might be going on in the world today. And I want to bring those up here in just a second. But one of the key things, and I'll hit on those here in just a moment. But one of the key things that I did find fascinating was the fact that everybody keeps talking about inflation. And of course, we're all suffering from it. I mean, everybody suffers from it in a manner of speaking. But one of the things that came out was when Elon started discussing what inflation actually is. Now, because you've been here on this program, and excuse me, you've been on this program, and you know that we've talked about it. We've talked about the inflation cycle. We've talked about, how inflation. Here we go. How inflation occurs, and I've told you multiple times with regards to the inflationary cycle, that government spending and government filling and overprinting money, which is what happens when government spends more than it takes in. Elon brings that up. But Elon Musk, who is the richest man in the world right now, or at least he is one of the richest, let's just put it that way. And, here, just take a listen. This is Elon Musk and Donald Trump talking about inflation.
The inflation, it doesn't matter what you make. The inflation is eating you alive. If you're a worker or if you're just a middle income person, you can't afford, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, people were saving a lot of money. Today, they're using all their money and borrowing money just to live. It's a horrible thing that's happening. And we'll end that quickly.
Well, I think a lot of people just don't understand where inflation comes from. Inflation comes from government overspending because the checks never bounce when it's written by the government. So if the government spends far more than it brings in, that increases the money supply. And if the money supply increases faster than the rate of goods and services, that's inflation. So really, we need to have we need to reduce our government spending. And we need to re-examine. I think we need like a government efficiency commission to say like, hey, where are we spending money that's sensible? Where is it not sensible? Right. And we need to live within our means. We're currently adding, I think, $1 trillion to the deficit roughly every 100 days. That's right. And the interest payments on the national debt have now exceeded the defense budget. It's on the order of $1 trillion.
It's interest,
and it keeps growing.
So the key points there that I want to bring up is the fact that Elon recognizes and tells you straight out that when the government starts printing money and the goods and services, the spending on goods and services don't keep up with it, what ends up happening is you end up in a situation that I've called out on this show. You have too many dollars chasing too few goods. And you need to understand this. This is a key point in really understanding inflation, okay? And what you need to fully grasp is that for every dollar that's printed, the more dollars that exist in the marketplace, the less value any one given dollar actually is. I mean, anyone who is a collector of rare items knows that if there's more than a few in the world of whatever that collector's item is, that makes each and every collector's item worth less. It is the exact same principle when it comes to money. The more money that's out in the market, the more it takes to buy those same goods and services that it's been chasing. And that is exactly what inflation is. And unfortunately, there are so many people on the left, especially our leftist politicians, that don't understand this. This is part of the reason why they keep pushing to increase spending, and spending, by the way, on stuff that we don't need. And that's exactly what Elon and Trump are talking about in terms of the efficiency thing. Right now, as Elon pointed out, we are adding $1 trillion to the deficit roughly every 100 days. That hasn't happened any time previously in history. This is an existential crisis. If we keep on this path, the American government will eventually be broke in all of this time. And a lot of people don't seem to get this, okay? Now, another key point, which Buddy brings up right here on Rumble, he says, I did a happy dance when Trump said abolish the Department of Education. A lot of people don't understand, and I've told you this on the program, the Department of Education was actually abolished at one point in our history and was brought back by Carter. President Carter brought back the Department of Education. And ever since then, if you really think about it, the Department of Education itself and what it's been doing to our educational system, there are people who are on the socials who have been arguing about this whole thing. They're like, well, if you abolish the Department of Education, our quality of education is going to go down. There was one individual who came up and said the Department of Education has been around for 44 years. I've been an educator for at least that long. The Department of Education has dropped the standards, has lowered standards. And especially in these last 15 years or so, where you start to see things like CRT, DEI, gender studies, and all these other things that are going on, okay? That by itself is key to understanding that if the advocacy of all of those non-essential items, see, the point of a public education is to get you the skills and knowledge that you need in order to be able to survive and make it in this world. And right now, what you're doing is you're replacing all of that with this idea of all these things like I am a victim merely because of the color of my skin, or I am an oppressor merely because of the color of my skin, which we know is not true. It's not even a fact. It's just, it's made up BS. Or trying to teach everybody that, hey, you can just choose your gender. You know, that's not true. You've got male parts and female parts. Okay, that is something that these people who are running the Department of Education, and especially the National Educators Association, the NEA, has really been pushing for a lot of these programs to get into these schools. And they hide it as though it is a requirement in order to learn. No, you need reading, you need writing, you need math, you need science, you need history. If anything is proving to the fact that the Department of Education is failing, it's when you look at places like Baltimore and Chicago, where both places, Baltimore and Chicago, they literally have 0 students that are passing math, reading, and other subjects, those 2 in particular, at a grade level. They're failing. There's not one student that was able to pass it in Baltimore not too long ago, and I think Chicago was even pretty damn close to it. This is just, it's to have that department and expect it to, I mean, not everything needs to be federalized, people. Not everything needs to go to the federal government. We don't need the nanny state. We don't need the nanny state. But anyway, so Elon Musk, ironically, made a comment with regards to the overspending too, and he was talking about creating a commission that would allow him, or would be, to a government efficiency commission. And ironically, Donald Trump said, you would be a good person to head that. So is that an indication that maybe Elon Musk might end up in federal government? I don't know. But anyway, what they did is they pointed, they also talked about the border, and they were talking about the border czar. They were talking about Kamala being the border czar and everything that they were done. And one of the things that Trump has been attacked on in multiple times, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to look for the clip, but one of the things that he's been attacked on multiple times has been discussing legal immigration versus illegal immigration. And of course, the left immediately jumped on this idea of the deportation and closing the border and so on and so forth. Well, Musk kind of brought that up in, I believe it's this clip. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
And I saw an ad by Kamala saying how she is going to provide border security. Where has she been for 3.5 years? For 3.5 years.
Yeah, no.
We have 20 million people for it. It's a terrible.
Yeah, I think this, frankly, I think this is a fundamental existential issue for the United States. And if we have another 4 more years of open borders, and it's going to be even worse with another 4 more years, it's going to be even worse than it's been for the past 3.5 years. I'm not sure we've got a country.
You don't have a country left. Elon, if they get in, you will have 50 to 60 million people from all over the world, not South America only. We think of South America, we think of Honduras and El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico, the 4. But it's not that. It's everywhere. They're coming in from everywhere. And I had to stay in Mexico.
Yeah, I think this is a super important point. Like people, it's like basically when I went down there, I was like, well, where are people from? It's like almost no one was from Mexico.
No, Mexico left.
It's just the border. It's just the border with Mexico. But the people coming in, it's Earth, the rest of Earth, and America is only about 4 or 5% of the population of Earth. It would only take a few percent of the rest of Earth to overwhelm everything.
We're already overwhelmed, Elon. We're overwhelmed.
Now, that clip didn't have what I was hoping it would have in it, but they were talking about the immigrants and the opportunity where the immigration, and again, Elon made it clear and had Trump agree with him and made it clear, which is essentially that legal immigration is fine. Illegal immigration, and this is one of the points that Elon was actually not 100% behind Trump on this, but Elon pointed out that not everybody that comes in illegally is actually a bad person, okay? But what he did call out is the fact that we don't know. And so that's the whole point of having a border and having legal immigration and having checks and certifying everything that came along. In fact, on Wendy Bell Radio this morning, she played a clip with regards to 3 Border Patrol officials who basically said that a large portion of the people that have come into this country thus far under the Biden administration have not undergone a legally mandated and required DNA collection test. Again, Alejandro Mayorkas and the DHS has decided to forego things that are legal and binding and required. And they've just allowed the Border Patrol to just say, you know what? Nah, we're not going to bother with it. And these whistleblowers came out and talked about it on her program. For that, you can go and check out Wendy Bell Radio on rumble.com, and you can check out what she has been talking about. Now, I want to be very clear and specific with this particular point. Now, there was a a policy discussion with regards to the tax on tips. Okay. And the tax on tips idea didn't necessarily start with Trump, but Trump has been advocating it first. And he advocated it several months ago. Well, what ended up happening here, not just this past weekend, is Kamala Harris jumped on that and said that she was the one that it wants to implement tax on tips. And in fact, one of the recent press conferences, they pointed that out to Karine Jean-Pierre, the sideshow Bob of the the sideshow Bob of the White House, and they pointed out to her, well, what about the tax on tips idea? And Karine Jean-Pierre lied. She flat out said, oh yeah, Biden is for no tax on tips. Well, here's the truth, folks. Here's the truth. That no tax on tips wasn't a part of the Biden administration. In fact, the Biden administration specifically went after people who were making money on tips that weren't getting collected. The Biden administration pushed the IRS to go after, people who were making tips and not reporting those taxes. And in fact, he even changed the laws. It was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, or as I call it, the Inflation Increasing Act. But it was part of that Inflation Reduction Act. Now, here's the thing, and this is the kicker. That Inflation Reduction Act, when it hit the Senate, had a perfect 50-50 split. Kamala Harris, being the president of the Senate, as vice president, cast the deciding vote to pass the Inflation Reduction Act, which did exactly what I just said in terms of going after people who make money on tips. Kamala Harris is a freaking chameleon. She is a freaking liar. And all she is doing, just like her shifting from being Asian Indian descent over to being a black person to trying to back to being Asian Indian descent when it suits her, she is lying. She's the one that passed the law that made it to where those waiters and waitresses and everybody in the hospitality industry had to start reporting everything so that they could collect those tips. Because Democrats lie, and all they want to do is tax, 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 and spend, spend, spend. They have no idea. They have no idea how to cut back on spending in order to start saving people money. They just look at government as a blank check. And they go forward from there. Well, to also call out Kamala Harris a little bit, I'm kind of shifting a little bit away from the Musk interview, the Elon Musk Trump Spaces interview. Kamala Harris has also tried to flip the script now that she did just the tax on tips, but she also flips the script, or attempts to flip the script, on the border. Now, here's the thing, is that the border is one of her most vulnerable issues because she was the damn border czar. She made a claim in her recent speech that she wanted to hire more border security agents, that we had the most secure border bill in front of them in history. And here's the problem. The actual border security bill, the one that was going to make the most difference, which was House Resolution 2, H.R. 2, was sent off to the Senate. And old Chucky Schumer has been sitting on it ever since. It has not, to the best of my knowledge, made it to the floor of the Senate yet to even be voted on because they don't want it. They're not interested. They are not interested in securing the border. In fact, and this I'm going to tell you, just like Tim Walz's problems that he's having with the whole stolen valor thing, which, by the way, I'm still waiting to hear hear about one of his troops defending him for that. They haven't. There's not a single one. I mean, from as I told you last night, the battalion commander, his senior NCO, even his chaplain have all come out against him and saying that he is a literal liar and a coward for what he did. Every single one of them has. Well, now we see that the Border Patrol has also chimed in on Kamala Harris. So here in the Daily Fetched, Border Patrol agents give Kamala Harris a reality check. We'd never vote for you. So Border Patrol agents were recently asked who they would vote for in the 2024 election, and all of them said it would definitely not be Kamala Harris. So you got to remember, Harris has vowed to give she would free all illegal aliens on day one of her presidency. She essentially, said that she would close down the detention centers that were holding these people. Not one border official even went as far as to say that Harris would be better than Joe Biden. First agent interviewed said, I would never vote for her. Second one said, these past 4 years have been a nightmare for the patrol, and it would be another 4 years of the same, probably worse than Biden, honestly. So these agents spoke, of course, on the condition of anonymity to the Washington Examiner. So these are agents from the rank and file members all the way up to supervisors in the upper echelon of management. And many of them, of course, said that their reasons for not voting for Harris included her radical views and lack of engagement with personnel due to personal and religious beliefs. Okay, keep in mind, folks, when you have a 92% turnover rate in your office, when you have people who have served under you in the military not coming to defend you, there is a bit of a problem in the leadership. And this isn't just either Walz or Harris. It is both. Folks, it is both. This is crazy. These are people, average, everyday people who have been working with these individuals or have supposedly been working with these individuals. And they are all saying, no way. This should be the biggest red flag, or one of the biggest red flags ever that you have ever seen in all of this situation. We cannot afford another 4 years of failed Democrat policies. They suck. They're horrible. They're anti-American, and they are not going to bring this country into the joy and sunshine that the Kamala Harris administration is attempting to try the campaign, not the administration, but the campaign is attempting to try and sucker people into. Oh, there's so much joy, so much sunshine. Oh, they bring joy to the campaign. Yeah, no, they're going to bring nothing but misery. All that joy is just a fallacy of what's going on. All right. So, a couple of things came out in the legal world that I really want to talk about. I've got about 20 minutes left, so we're going to go ahead and do that. First of all, the left has never given up on this fake idea that there was an insurrection on January 6th. Even with the overturning of the obstruction charges by the Supreme Court, which I haven't heard of anybody, I haven't heard anything in the mainstream media since that has occurred with the 300 plus people that were going to get their convictions overturned because of it. We haven't heard boo or squat in the mainstream media about any of those cases. However, what we did hear about is a simple little 72-year-old grandma who has received what is reported to be the largest fine ever. Here in the National Pulse. 72-year-old January 6th praying grandma gets largest ever fine. The Biden-Harris government claims she continues to pose a political violence threat. Political violence threat for praying? That's political violence. She spent roughly 10 minutes in the Capitol and did nothing but pray. That was it. That's all she did. Her name is Rebecca Laverns. She's known as the praying grandma. She's been sentenced to 12 months of probation, including 6 months of house arrest, and ordered to pay what is considered to be the largest misdemeanor fine in U.S. history for her involvement in the January 6th Capitol protests. She was found guilty of 4 federal misdemeanor charges related to her participation in the protest against the certification of the 2020 presidential election results, which amounted to walking into an open door at the U.S. Capitol and praying in the tourist areas. That's all she did. See, the attorney, U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves, threw in his opinion that because Lawrence had pointed out the political persecution of J6ers, she should be considered unrepentant in her promotion of the riot. That, Graves laughably claims, is powerful evidence that she continues to pose a threat to future acts of political violence. They are after you. They are after all of us. They are after anyone who prays, anyone who worships God, who is in a Christian or Jewish, Judeo-Christian religion. That's who they are after. That's who they are after. She received a fine of, I believe it was close to $103,000. Now, I didn't look, but I've heard that there was a GoFundMe put together that was in this. I heard this on Wendy Bell Radio this morning again. And I heard that she was only about $20,000 short. But this, this is ridiculous. And here's the kicker, too. The judge, the U.S. District Court judge overseeing the case is a Muslim. Yeah. She's a Muslim. If that isn't religious prosecution and persecution, I don't know what it is. Laverns told the judge after she got sentenced, "While I respect you, I answer to a higher judge." Her defense team argued that her internet ban, by the way, she's also restricted from being on the internet, and it prevents her, believe it or not, from managing her bed and breakfast business. So they're looking to destroy her, not only monetarily, but also making sure that financially she has a hard time supporting herself. So she can't check her email. She can't access online banking. I don't know about the rest of you, but I know online banking is like the only, I haven't been inside a bank branch in years. What the hell is all this about? Yeah. It's going to impact her livelihood, which is why I think the GoFundMe was put together. But hey, you know, these lawsuits, they're not all doom and gloom, by the way. They really aren't. So one of the ways that they were able to get a hold of these people for January 6th was using a technique whereby it's called geofencing. And what it does essentially is, in the cellular world, is it looks at massive data dumps, by the way, where they go through the data that is collected, because your cell phones collect all kinds of data on you. They collect phone information, call information. They collect actual physical location for you based on geotagging, okay, geographical tagging. And what these things do, I mean, you're basically carrying a tracker in your pocket. But what they do is they go and they send all this information. And if you're on an Android system, it goes all the way to Google. If you're on a iPhone system, it goes to Apple. Now, while Apple has in the past been a bit of a stickler when it comes to these things, Apple did eventually succumb to requests from the government to be able to like unlock phones and things like that. Well, again, going back to the whole geofencing idea, what they do is they look at things like what cellular towers did your phone connect to and communicate with. Even if you're just going around and walking around and not using your phone is still connecting to cell towers. It's still reaching out to those cell towers and doing things that are that help assist with roaming, so that when you pick the phone up, it is connected to a tower and ready to go. That's all part and parcel of the whole protocols. But the geofencing, essentially what it's doing is it's basically gathering any of that geospatial information and connecting up to the systems such as Google to be able to determine, were you anywhere near, in this particular case, the Capitol building, but anywhere near these locations. And that's how they actually were able to grab most of the people's identifications. Well, this is going to be very, very interesting. Why am I saying that? Because there was an appeals court ruling yesterday, this coming from the Epoch Times, there was an appeals court ruling yesterday that geofence warrants are unconstitutional. Now, this comes from the warrants that often result in Google searching its volumes of user databases. And this, according to the appeals court, violates the U.S. Constitution's Fourth Amendment. Now, for those of you that may not remember the Fourth Amendment is against warrantless searches and seizures, unreasonable searches and seizures, if I recall correctly. I will verify that here in just a second. Oh, sorry. It is the right. Yes, it is. So the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Again, this is one of those things that Trump is probably going to bring up in his case against the government for the Mar-a-Lago raid as well, was that his Fourth Amendment rights were violated. So now the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and a unanimous 3-judge panel has said that geofence warrants violate that Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. From U.S. Circuit Court Judge Carolyn Deneen King, in her 39-page decision, quote, "We hold that geofence warrants are modern-day general warrants and are unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment." So for an example, what they did at the Capitol is they basically said, hey, Google, we want to know every single person that was in the Capitol at the time of January 6th. And Google, of course, said, oh, okay, fine, here you go. Did a data dump, and that's how they found everybody. So, yeah. So 3 people apparently who robbed a Postal Service driver back in 2018 sued because the investigators turned to a geofence warrant when they couldn't identify any suspects. And this is where the generality comes into play. The people said they have a reasonable expectation of privacy when it concerns their digital data. The warrants are based on crime scene locations and garner a list of phones and phone owners who were at or near the scene when the crime was committed. Now, most geofence warrants are made to Google, of course, was presented with a warrant in the Postal Service case. Google, when presented with geofence warrants, has to search its entire database to find responsive records, which come from users who have agreed to share their location history. When it searches its database, Google does conduct a search that implicates the Fourth Amendment, the appeals court panel said. Pretty much. That's the case. The Fourth Amendment states that you can't, you have to know, and this is the point that I was making the other night. You have to know specifically what you are looking for. You have to have a reasonable expectation to know where that thing is. And then when you go before a judge, you have to, as the officer goes in and says, here's the evidence that I'm looking for. Here's where we believe it to be. We saw it there, or you give some sort of backup to basically say, we're relatively certain that it's there, and I swear and affirm that that is all that I'm going to be looking for. Which is essentially what they didn't do under Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago raid, because it was a general warrant. They were searching in frickin' Melania's drawers, for God's sakes. It's this kind of action, and where the Fourth Amendment came from is again, just to kind of wrap this around, back in the pre-Revolutionary War days, the redcoats were allowed to just walk in and search for anything at any time under the auspices of the king. So that's just that. This is a big thing. If this ends up getting appealed and goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, this is really going to be a huge deal. This could very well invalidate any of those January 6th arrests, because again, all those people that were found because of the fact that their geofence warrant gave them who was there. Now, another one, this one a little bit closer to home, when we're talking about being attacked because you're a Judeo-Christian religious follower. Okay, and I'm kind of lumping them all together because, let's face it, if it was a Muslim, they wouldn't be going after Muslims at all. In fact, they don't. They leave them alone. They let them party in the streets. They're Palestinian riots and stuff. They let them go. Okay, well, here in my own backyard, and part of the reason why I'm kind of highlighting this one is because it is in my backyard. it does have to deal with a Christian organization, but it also deals with one of our running candidates for governor, Bob Ferguson, who is the Attorney General of Washington State. He is worse than Jay Inslee. If anything, I mean, it's almost like you have Biden and then you have Kamala Harris. We're dealing with the exact same thing here in terms of Bob Ferguson versus Jay Inslee. Jay Inslee is kind of like, in a way, likened to Biden, and Bob Ferguson would be the Kamala Harris of this particular situation. But there was a case here in the state where a organization called the Union Gospel Mission, okay, and they are a nonprofit organization. They are a Christian-based nonprofit organization that does things like helps the homeless, gives meals, clothing, help, and everything else, okay? And what they did is they were advertising for workers. They were trying to hire some people. They were putting, employment out. And what essentially they did is they, as a part of the employment application, they would have you agree to, as an employee, you would have to agree to an adherence to a Christian lifestyle and belief, including only engaging in sexual conduct that would be in a marriage between a man and a woman. Well, the problem came up is that one of their potential employees happened to be gay and did not like it, and so took them to court under Washington State's law against discrimination. The original judge said that the Union Gospel Mission hasn't proven their case in terms of the going against the Washington State law. And by the way, Washington State officials, this also from the Epoch Times, Washington State officials have refused to say whether or not they will enforce the law against the Christian ministry. And so here's part of the case, or part of the problem. Well, the judge originally, the original judge, which was the lower court judge, let's see, where was it? Oh, yeah. U.S. District Court Judge Mary Kay Dimke back in 2023 actually rejected the suit originally, finding that the case itself was outside her jurisdiction because it sought a review of precedent established by the Washington Supreme Court, which has ruled that a Christian group violated the law when it decided not to hire a man who was in a gay relationship. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit panel, though, has said that Dimke should not have turned away the case. The Union Gospel Mission, according to the panel, has shown that it is being injured by the law by having to self-censor, and there is a possibility that state officials will prosecute the group if it continues to hire based on the belief that marriage is between a man and a woman, the panel said. So, the decision overturning Dimke's ruling with regard to the dismissal of the case and her rejection of the mission's request for a preliminary injunction is now rendered moot. So the panel has remanded the case back to the district judge to reconsider based on what they call ripeness. They said that she should think about entering a preliminary injunction. So this is interesting, considering the fact that it's the Ninth Circuit Court, which the Ninth Circuit Court, I believe, still holds the record for being the most overturned court in the land. I don't think this one is going to be overturned, though. The Alliance Defending Freedom senior counselor Ryan Tucker, who's representing the mission, said in a statement that the appeals court rightly overturned the lower court's dismissal, permitting the ministry to pursue protection for its constitutional rights in federal court. So this is a awesome case. Another one that we're going to have to pay attention to because it may come back on us in this day and age. And one last thing, I don't know if anybody has heard, but apparently Tulsi Gabbard is going to sue the Biden administration because she was apparently put on the terrorist watch list. She was put on what a lot of people call the no-fly list, but she's been marked under the Quiet Skies program. So, yeah, why? Why was she put on it? I mean, that's the thing. I don't understand. There's no reason for her to be part of it. And yet she was. Oh, yeah. She's been talking about the Biden administration and has been outwardly vocal about it. And so now she's apparently been put on the Quiet Skies program. So now she's going to sue. So we're going to have to watch that one, too. Oh, my gosh. There's so much that has happened just in the last 6, 7, 8 years. Whew. It's just amazing. Anyway, that's it for me for tonight. I'm out of time. Do me a favor. If you enjoy the program, head on over to Rumble. Go to rumble.com, sign up for an account if you haven't already. And, of course, it's free. And once you are there, search up the American Perspective channel and make sure you hit that green follow button to be notified every single time I go live. I will see you tomorrow night, which is Whiskey Wednesday. I'll see you tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening. We'll see you tomorrow, and good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.